What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Infamous going back for the 15-year anniversary, which was actually this past Sunday. I tried to line this up pretty close, and oh my lord, I have so much to say about this game from when it first released, the infamous versus Prototype battle, and what I think about this game now. And look, hey, you see the title, you see the thumbnail. Let me make something very, very clear right as we start this off. I think this is a good game. I think Infamous is one of the better franchises out there. The originality of it, right, to do this superhero thing, but also, depending on the choices, being able to do the anti-hero thing, it's so good. And I think Infamous 2 is just such a well-rounded game. I think it's an incredible game. But when I think of, I mentioned the Infamous versus Prototype thing, I actually would give it to Prototype. And I always have thought that from the very beginning, from 2009, I bought my PS3 for Prototype. I played Prototype. I freaking love it. I played both of these games actually in the last couple of weeks. I still think Prototype is the better game. But Infamous is where it all started. And again, I think it's still a good game, but it hasn't aged as well as I thought it did. Replaying it, looking at some of the side missions, some of the structure of this game, I think it's a lot weaker than I remember it being. But again, not to diminish it, not to say this is some terrible game. I fired this thing up on the PS3. So before we get too far into it, let's just show you the full thing. This, to my knowledge, I got this, I believe, in 2009. I didn't get it right away. Did not get it right away. I got, like I said, Prototype for PS3. I think maybe the first big PlayStation 3 franchise. Well, I played MotorStorm and Resistance. That came in the bundle, but Uncharted 1 was the first, I would say, big pillar franchise. But Infamous, we got and I love, just looking at the front here, oh my dear God, and then even this, like the cover here, some amazing artwork from top to bottom, whether he's evil, whether he's good, and that's a big part to it. Even you see like right here, right? I love the idea where it's like this is good, and then and we've seen this kind of still image where it's all red and his eyes and his face is a little decaying like, and then you have this where he's evil. So they absolutely nailed that, from the logo to the looks, and even when you jump into the game, like it's got that 2009 feel. I saw, we've seen pictures on Twitter and stuff of that era of Gears of War and Prototype and Infamous and Resistance. Actually, there's so many games probably from like 2007 to maybe like 2010, 2011, like a good 3 to 5 year span where kind of all the games generally look the same, kind of gloomy and atmospheric in that way. But all right, let's get into the game itself. And remember, this is kind of a special episode or video for the channel. I actually wanted your guys' feedback, whether it was, your own experience playing, questions for me, etc. I'm going to be kind of splicing them into this video, and we're going to do this monthly. So if you guys are interested in that, keep an eye on the community tab and just generally follow. But we're going to be including some of your own concerns and experiences playing Infamous. We're going to be including that into this video. I want to start with, well, what did I play as? Well, when I first played it, I played good, and I got to be real, I played it as good again. I feel like I have a moral compass. I feel like I want to do the right thing, and generally in these games, I choose the good playthrough. If it's Dragon Age, if it's Mass Effect, if it's Witcher, if there's kind of ambiguous choices, whatever game it might be, first time through, I always try to choose the nicest options. If it's kind of voice lines, right, audio stuff, or whether it's big decisions, I always try to do good. Now, I played good again because I was just, it's been a long time since I played this game. And then I restarted it, and I played the first couple hours evil, okay? And in fact, we're going to do a live stream this Friday, and I'm going to continue the evil playthrough. I very rarely played this game evil, and I think that could be a problem because one of the things that I forgot about this game until I jumped back in is the difficulty. Now, I played this game on normal, and I'm very close to platinuming it, but one thing that's going to hold me back is the difficulty. You have to beat this thing on hard to get the platinum trophy, and when you enter these areas, right, and not when they're necessarily blacked out because you have to restore power, right, but once you're done restoring power and whatever enemy it might be has control, the amount of goddamn enemies that are shooting you. And these guys, remember Uncharted with like the perfect grenade throwing? This game has it, but with aim, with just bullets. And this game is, I would say, much more infuriating than Uncharted. Uncharted, it was the aim of the grenades. You could be in the perfect spot, defending your little corner as Nathan Drake. Somebody could throw a grenade literally right next to you, right next to your hip. It'll land. It'll stay there perfectly, and you'll die. In this game, you can be across the freaking street down the road, which I was numerous times. You could be so far away, and these enemies will snipe you like you've never seen before. And the funny thing is, you can't really do it back. Now, you can do the headshots and get that, but oftentimes it'll actually cut you off with distance. If they're too far away, your lightning blast will only go so far, and then it'll kind of, it'll cut off, it'll disappear. So I found that infuriating, and that was one of the things that I remember, like, once I experienced it again, I said, oh yeah, I remember this game has way too many enemies. They're way too difficult. Not in that, not like I'm a terrible gamer. I play a lot of games. I think I'm pretty okay. But that they're just such good aim, and you got to be really, really careful. And, I like to get the shards. I try to collect them all. I would go to the satellites and get the dead drops and all that. And I love hearing the story. This game has a very good story kind of in the background. I don't know. It's not really pushed at you all that much. I mean, yes, in the main missions, I suppose, but this game does some of those classic things where, especially in the beginning, you're going in and the missions are just going to kind of teach you about everything else. And some of the missions are repetitive in the sense that, you have to restore power. The side missions repeat themselves, right? There are some big missions that push the story. There's some even side stuff that you can kind of discover on your own that pushes it. And I do think at its core, from Kessler to Cole, and we're going to talk about each of these things individually, I think this is a really solid story and a really amazing twist at the end, which we'll also talk about. One thing I want to bring up also kind of early in this video, and this is something I really didn't think about at the time, but I want to give a huge thank you to Sucker Punch, I guess, in a way. This game reminded me of Sly Cooper so much. Now, you think about Sucker Punch, and like Sly is their origin story, and you think of Sly 1, 2, 3, and then I believe Sly 3 was 2005, and this was 2009. The amount of the feel that this game has to Sly Cooper is undeniable. And I feel it in Ghost of Tsushima. When I first played Ghost of Tsushima, I said there's a lot of Infamous in the kind of the floatiness of the jumping, almost like a hover kind of feel. And when you play the first Infamous game, it's the same thing. I almost felt like I was playing as Sly Cooper, whether it's the fighting itself, whether it's the parkouring, whether it's just kind of the floatiness that Cole has when he's jumping. You feel Sly. You also feel Sly in that they really kept so much of that energy with kind of cutscenes and then the comic strips. And I mean, that was such an iconic part, and I think still holds up really well in Sly Cooper when they're planning a heist, when they defeat whatever like the end boss is, and they wrap up that chapter, and then they drive the van, and they go into the next one, they set that one up. Infamous has the same thing, but it's dark, and I think I respect that so much because you play it, and you have the characters running up. You have Zeke running up, and it reminds me of like Murray running up and just saying a line to Sly Cooper, and the way the camera looks and the way the camera changes, it's ripped right out of Sly Cooper's playbook. And then again, when you have the comic strip kind of things, number one, beautiful, amazing artwork there, and it'll change depending on if you're good or bad, right? Like you'll see different kind of design, but it's got the same feel. It's got the same energy. It's got the same almost pacing to it that Sly Cooper has. Now, all of those things I would say is an absolute strength of Infamous, but also I just want to throw out like how much it reminded me of Sly. Even when you're restoring power and you get a new ability and you're underground, right? And then you have to do some parkouring, you have to defeat some enemies. It reminded me of a vault in Sly Cooper. Like that's exactly what it reminded me of. So I don't know. I didn't think about that. Maybe it's because, well, 2009, I'm just getting a PlayStation. I don't know who Sucker Punch is. I don't know what a Naughty Dog is. Maybe you know Naughty Dog of Crash. Maybe you know Sucker Punch from Sly. I don't really think I did, to be honest with you. Maybe I found out later. So playing Infamous, I don't even know if I put 2 and 2 together, but having my love for Sly, which I had back then as well, playing Infamous now, I'm always talking about Infamous and Sly. It's crazy how much Infamous, represents or like reflects what Sly Cooper did. So I want to get through a couple other kind of pros and cons of this game, and then I want to address some of the stuff that you guys were talking about. But in terms of a couple more negatives, I mentioned like just the enemies, how many there are in general. I do like the variety, like there's an okay variety, but I do think they peaked in the very beginning. I believe the Reapers, right? That red design, and when they come up, when the food drops at the very beginning, that's iconic to me. It's not like the biggest opener like of all time. The start screen is when you hit start and then literally the bomb goes off. Amazing. That is such a clever just opening in general. general. And I think just the opening when you're walking across the bridge and the explosion and Zeke thinks it's the terrorist, but it's really actually you, right? I love that. I think that's really good. And I guess that would be more of a big opening. But, you know, the first mission when you're running with Zeke and you find the food and you get to make a decision, I remember that scene so much. And I remember a couple of the missions in this game so much, but that's a big one. And, you know, the Reapers storm in. And they got that really cool, like, long, almost robe-like thing, right? But it's all red. I just think it's such a cool design. And I also think they're maybe generally easier enemies. Once you get to more, and I don't remember, like, the faction names, but kind of like the trash-like people where they're all kind of, like, more metally. Their shoulders are, you know, sticking up more. You got some of, like, the junk monsters where you have to shoot them a ton. Those ones I feel like the game peaked in the beginning, to be honest with you. I don't feel like when they introduce new enemies, some of the bosses are cool, okay? Like, actually, Kessler himself, that is a pretty cool boss, but, you know, some of the secondary enemies that you get later on, I always enjoyed fighting the Reapers. I always enjoyed going on the train, whether it's on top of the train or on the train tracks. Always enjoyed fighting the Reapers. Always enjoyed doing the shards. I think finding shards is just kind of fun. There's definitely too many of them, but it's still, you know, I like the parkouring. The parkouring in this game and the movement in this game, especially when you get what I guess we can call the glide, right? When he's able to hover, which it does not last forever, and I don't know really why they did that, maybe because of the technology at the time, but I do think that is the best kind of version of this game. When you're more super powered, when you're able to kind of do all of your abilities, when you're gliding on like the rails, which is a little bit Sly Cooper, but a little bit faster, when you're able to hover and get from one building to the next, when you're chucking bombs and, you know, you're shooting a headshot and then it explodes off and hits other people, that is where this game is at its best. There's something very cool to the electricity. Like, electricity is another thing that look, Delson had like multiple, you know, abilities. They peaked at Cole. They peaked at Cole because there's something special, again, about just the cover, about the electricity kind of raining in the background. His ability to do like the thunder thing that you really get much, much later in the game. I think too late into the game, but that is where this game, I think, is at its strength. It looks beautiful. It's fun to switch hands, you know. And when I first played this game, I actually played it inverted. I thought there was no way of changing it because, again, Alex of 2009, I have no idea what I'm doing. I actually thought you had to do it. And I think it's only inverted one way. I forget if it's up and down or left and right, but one of them stays inverted and you have to change it, you know, in the options. I did now, but when I first played it, I mastered the game inverted, and I was nailing headshots. And it's satisfying to get headshots. It's satisfying to hide behind something, chuck a bomb, or, you know, do the thunder lightning. The game can be really, really fun. And even some of the side missions, like, now they range a little bit, but I would say, again, in terms of some of the negatives and why I don't think the game holds up as well, you know, I mentioned too many enemies, and that stuff just really makes me mad. I think it's very unfair that they're able to shoot the way that they are. The side missions are too repetitive, and there's nothing more maddening about this game than when you go to a side mission, you do it, and then it tells you liberated 2% more of the map. That infuriated me, where it's like, can you give me a little bit more? Because you end up doing a lot of the same things. You end up doing that satellite run, which is not terrible. Like, I don't think any of it is terrible. That's the thing. The game is a good game. The game has always been a good game, and it might forever be a good game. But there's just some, again, design choices in it where it's like, this was the era of too many enemies with too much precision, right? This was the era of kind of flooding it with too repetitive missions, and there's not too many of them, but then they're so repetitive that it gets old very, very fast. This was the era of populating the map with a lot of things, and developers still do that now. I don't really think that's gotten any better, but the shards and the voice recordings. The recordings are cool because they give you a little bit of backdrop into the first Sons, and one thing I also realized about this game is, wow, this game really sets up, I forgot, this game sets up not only two with the Beast, which is huge for the ending of this game, but also literally sets up Infamous Second Son. So, like, the names and the factions and, you know, what's going on in the military and in the government and all that stuff. I forgot this game did a lot of that stuff, and some of it's a little bit more subtle. Some of it you would completely miss if you don't do those voice recording kind of side things, right? And then you get to the main story, and again, I think the main story gets boggled down a little bit with having two different villains, which I think slows it down a bit. Kessler doesn't really even come in till the second half. He is mentioned so much in the voice recording, so you know of his presence, and they're kind of building it, but it takes a while for him to actually enter the picture. There's a lot of immediately there's kind of confusion with Cole and Trish because it's like you're all good, and then immediately just one thing in terms of, well, he had the bomb, and how did he get the bomb, and how was he trusted with it? The background there, I think, is really cool because that starts to paint the picture. Okay, why was he chosen? Like, why? And he asks himself that. Why was I chosen to do this? Why was it me that, had this bomb? It was just a delivery thing, right? And then you start to realize, what goes on. I mentioned characters. I think Trish is actually a really good character. We'll talk about her big thing in a second. You have Zeke. Zeke is the standout here. He's funny. He's a little different. I don't really know if his character would fly nowadays in games, but I really, and Jedediah, right? I love that. And I gotta say, I love Cole and Zeke's back and forth. And I actually really like Cole. I don't know, maybe it was because of that Uncharted, literally Uncharted, the game. It was maybe because of that time period where they kind of had to be a little bit more light, a little bit, like they had to have kind of that soft side. And although you can make good decisions, Cole always does come across as a little bit of an anti-hero, right? You can play him full on as that, but even if you play him as good, like he's not this super lovable kind of guy, but he's not boring. Like, you think of some boring characters in gaming. I don't think he's like empty. I just think he's kind of who he is. I think he's a very original kind of 2009 character. And I mean, I like his voice in Infamous 2, and I think, that was a fine decision, but I like his voice here, and I like his looks. I think he's got a really good just character design, and I like his relationship with Trish. I think it's a great relationship. Zeke, Moya, who's he's hearing on the intercom basically the entire game. I think they have some really good dynamic, and I think the game's story is at the best when you have these characters kind of interacting with each other. Okay, only a couple other things to really talk about before we get into what you guys had to say. Let's talk about the big Trish decision, and let's talk about the big twist. So these are major. If you have not played Infamous, these are major spoilers, okay? The Trish thing, I forgot how it went. When I was going up the 2 towers, right? And you say, okay, I remember that. I remember 1 person, 5 people. I remember that. I forgot, and then, upon looking it up, it's like, okay, no matter what you choose, Trish dies. Now, I played this, and actually there's a comment that's literally exactly what I'm about to say, so we'll give credit to that person as well, and you know who you are. When I played this game the second time, I was going for the good choice, and I chose the 1 person, Trish, because I thought that was her. I forgot no matter what you do. So I kind of ruined my only good playthrough, or like only make good choices, right? I still maxed everything out. I didn't get every ability. I think I still had some more experience points, but I got many of the abilities in this game. I did every single good mission. I cleaned the entire map up, and when it came to choices, I was all the way good. I was I think it's superhero or hero, maybe is the name of the top choice. I got there. But this choice was something that kind of let me down because, I'm climbing it, and you have Kessler saying, oh, I'm really disappointed in you, and it's like, oh dear, and and it's not her, and she's one of the 5. Later did I realize, no, I didn't realize, even now replaying it, I forgot. So I looked it up, and it's like, oh, if you choose the other way, if you think she's one of the 5, she's actually the 1. So no matter what, you'll lose her. That's big. That's really big. To be honest with you, it's tough because you couldn't make that the ending, but it really felt like an ending where it was just such an impactful thing. And I think they lingered on it long enough where you kind of got to feel it, but then you kind of move on, and he's like, I'm going to kill this Kessler guy. And I don't know, like I felt it had an impact. It didn't have the most impact that I would have been looking for, and I think that's only because it was a major character death. It was a major decision, and the only time the game tricks you, the game doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Good is good and bad is bad, and it's up to you to choose which one you want to do, and you're going to get rewarded, effectively for each one, right? But for this, it's like, no, the game has a story to tell you, and you're going to be screwed no matter which you choose. It felt very jarring to me. I don't hate it. I just kind of forgot that happened. I think the thing I hate or dislike the most about that scene is that maybe it doesn't linger fully. It doesn't deliver that impact as much as I would have wanted it. But again, you still had more missions to do afterwards, right? So then we get to the big twist, and this is one that I think I remembered, going through. So the Beast and Kessler, alternate timeline thing. I gotta say, it's a really good twist. It's a really, when you think about it like that, and as I mentioned earlier, when you're hearing Kessler in these recordings and you start to build up some of the backdrop kind of information of, they even have a reason why, like, the city is the way that it is, and there's always kind of this danger that they're just going to glass the city and all this. Like, it's bad, right? And you start to learn all of this behind-the-scenes stuff, and then you put it all together where it's like Kessler is you from the future, and he failed to take out the Beast. And they don't really, there is no conclusion with that, right? Because that's the second game. But you know that there's this ultimate threat that Kessler was unable to deal with, and he's making sure that you're going to be able to. And one thing that held him back was Trish. And so he has to eliminate, and it's sad. It's hard for Kessler. Kessler did not want to do that. Cole doesn't want to do that. But I thought that was just an incredibly good, I mentioned Prototype and Infamous, and I will say, I think the overall story, at least that part, is such a highlight of Infamous. It might beat anything Prototype has up its sleeve, even though I think I like Prototype more. But it's very impactful. So in terms of impact, that's a big impactful thing. Zeke is a great character throughout, but some of the things they do with Zeke, I forgot that he kind of turns bad, but he turns bad in, like, the weirdest ways, right? Where he blames himself, he leaves. For some reason, he's like this marksman, that works with the police. He leaves his post. Alden escapes, which, by the way, actually 3 villains, right? Sasha, Alden, and then Kessler. And I think that's where this game goes a little wrong, because you think Sasha, for a good amount of it, is the main villain, and then, she doesn't end up dying. She escapes, but she kind of gets siphoned from her powers, from Kessler, right? So it's like, the game has a problem, I think, and maybe a little bit like Sly Cooper, where, like, it has to jump around, but this game doesn't introduce the final villain except for towards the end of it, and they kind of have these different villains at play. So I think that kind of goes a little wrong there, but I really do think the twist is powerful. I think the overall story is pretty good, and hey, when I'm making decisions in this game, like, it feels good, and it's cool, especially upon replaying, and I was choosing some of the bad ones. I will say a couple things. I think you're actually more powerful when you're playing evil. And I don't know if this is the case for all, because I only ever played good. I saw one person on Twitter actually did, like, a breakdown where, in their belief, they say, it's in terms of power, it's better to play evil in Infamous 1, but good in Infamous 2. And that's not story decisions. It's just how powerful you feel. That's one element of this game that I do think let me down a little bit, because maybe it's the enemy's difficulty, or maybe it was my inability or whatever, but you don't feel too powerful. I felt very like I had to hide and wait for an opportunity to do something. And again, maybe that was difficulty, maybe that was whatever, but playing as evil, I like those side missions actually better. I think they're more, like, kind of ruthless than the good ones, even though, again, they repeat. But I do think evil might be the way to play this game. And one other big thing I want to talk about in terms of a negative, that I'm saving this for the end, and then we'll get to your stuff, is the frame rate and the technical side. This is something that let me down so much. Like, we've talked about Infamous being stuck on PS3, Infamous 1 at least, right? This game needs help. It needs a remaster. It needs a remake. If you play this game again, and again, I did, and I played it on the PS3, running it. I mean, the fan had opportunity to breathe and all that stuff. The game chugs. I mean, when you're facing off against these big battles, and they try to throw a couple big battles at you. They try when you're on the bus and you have to escort something and the enemies are coming and you have to, strike them. They try to have these bigger set pieces, fighting scenes. The game basically stops in its track. Like, I don't know what the frame, I didn't, like, track the frame rate. It had to get to, like, 10, 15, maybe less than 10. It almost broke. Firing, throwing these bombs. There's like 20 enemies on screen. The game, the console cannot handle it. This is something. The number one, I'm not a big frame rate guy in the first place, but this was abysmal. This was something that took me out of the experience, because I'd be firing, and then all of a sudden the game would just stop, and it's like, okay, I guess we're not doing this anymore. It can't do that. It can't do that. I think, obviously, that's a byproduct of the time, 2009. The game was trying to push it in certain regards, and it just couldn't do it. So, that's why, if you're wondering, well, why isn't it as good as you remember it being? I think the story is not as flowing as I remember it being. I think the twist is still good. I think there's individual moments. I think the characters are great, but the story overall is not as good as I remember it being. The repetition is not as good as I, recall, and maybe I just didn't think about it back then. The enemy designs, whether it's the newer enemies that I just didn't like, or maybe too many enemies, the missions being too repetitive in terms of, again, the main missions. I think there's 3 or 4 of them where you're literally just going down into a tunnel. They're different tunnels, but you're still going down into a tunnel. And the performance, the performance took me out of it at times. So those are, I would say, the big things that this game did that I was like, I cannot say it's as good as I remember. I held Infamous 1 up very, very high, and I would still hold the franchise up high, and I still hold 2 up very high, but I don't hold 1 up as high as I used to. I think it has dropped a bit. Okay, so without further ado, I want to look at some of the, reception, some of the comments that you guys had. First thing is, well, I mentioned good versus bad, so I want to do a poll. Now, this isn't the biggest poll. It has, I think, a little less than 100 people, but I said, what do you play as, good or bad? Because I think Evil is better. I think Evil actually makes the game easier. Well, looking at the poll's numbers, 76% chose good and 24% chose Evil. So I feel like, hopefully, you guys understand what I'm talking about when I say, good. I think good is the morally righteous thing to do, but in terms of the difficulty, Evil just has better chain attacks and different things like that. Good doesn't. So hopefully other people can reflect that, right? Because I think if most people played good, maybe most people had a harder time than all of us would have if we played as Evil. Okay, so now reading through some comments, we have R. Rice 3142. I played as good. I really miss Cole as the main character. First 2 games were great. I didn't care for Delsin much. I always thought it would be a great idea for them to do an Infamous 4, bring Cole back, have Delsin go evil with a Delsin versus Cole storyline. Sad that we can't even get a remake/remaster. Meme Sauce says, I always played as good guy Cole, loved Zeke, and I remember the subway tunnel mission being a pain in particular. Exeter FG says, I've always played as good Cole. The game holds a special place in my heart because I got it with my PS3 and it was the first game I played on it. I definitely struggled a lot with how hard it was back then, but when I replayed it, I found it to be easier, but still a challenging game. So I guess I've gotten better at playing games. One of the things I'll always remember about playing this game for the first time is the choice you have to make between saving Trish evil or saving the 5 doctors good. The first time I played, I was doing the total good playthrough, but I absolutely did not want Trish to die, which I agree, that's exactly me. So I chose to save her. Boy, was I mad when it turned out she was one of the 5 doctors, and the girl I saved was a decoy. I was so mad that she died that I yanked the power cord out of my PS3 in the hopes that I hadn't saved yet. Luckily, it didn't, and I played through it again to save the doctors. But it turns out that in the good choice, it really is Trish hanging by herself. So no matter what, you can't save Trish. I was so mad at the game for playing such a dirty trick by giving the false illusion of choice. It took me a while to get over that. Overall, I have fond memories of this game, even with its flaws, of which it has many. I could write a whole book about them, but it has this certain 360 PS3 era charm that so many games had that I love. And then we even have Elvis saying playing is always good. Let me just talk about those first, and there's actually a second batch. I completely agree. Thank you all, by the way, for sending those. I think one thing you can kind of say for certain, and we might actually see that with the other group of comments, is it needs to be brought back. This is a franchise that, with the flaws of the first game or not with the flaws, it's a special franchise. And I think it only actually, well, maybe Second Son takes a little bit of a step back, but it gets good for a while. It continues to build. So I do absolutely, resonate with the idea that bring back Cole. We'll talk about that when we get to Infamous 2 one day. I don't think that was a great decision. I think Cole should have stayed the protagonist, but I completely agree. And then even to the longer comment, that's exactly me. That's what I was hinting in the beginning or middle of this video. I can't believe it. I can't believe they did that with Trish, but he's right. The idea that this game, it has some jank, and it even has some jank in the side stuff. When you're going around and you're talking to the NPC, and you might have already seen it in my B-roll that I'm putting in here. When you go around to the NPCs in this game and they're giving you the quests, the side quests, they can sometimes do this weird bending thing where their hands are over their heads and they're acting like they have no idea what they're doing. Some of these AI are absolutely nuts and they're just not programmed well, or maybe it's because something just happened where people got blown up and the NPC is trying to react to it. It has some jank and it's definitely not perfect. I do agree with that. And like I mentioned, even with the visual style, 2009, this was the era. This was, like it or hate it, like parts of it, hate parts of it. This was such a special era. You were just getting Uncharted, if you're talking about like the PS3 ecosystem. We were about to get Heavy Rain like a year later. Like, you had Gears of War still going on. Halo was wrapping up, or already wrapped up, at least Halo 3. It was a special era. And again, what I want to give this game credit for was the originality. Like, to do a superhero game, this is a superhero game, and to do it so well and to kind of build this background of these kind of cults, you know, these cult groups that are like rising up, I think did a really, really good job. So let's read the other group and we'll get out of here. So you have Sergeant Anthony saying playing Infamous was one of the best of times. I was playing the first game for an entire summer. You have OU Keith saying, I really wish Sucker Punch would remaster 1 and 2 so we can play them on new hardware. You have Applerski saying, although I don't have specific memories for the first game of how much I like it and how good the graphics were, I can say it was a series that brought me back to the PlayStation as my primary console. Uncharted 1 was the reason I got a PS3, but then all of a sudden we got Infamous, Killzone 2 and 3. I discovered Resistance. We got Heavy Rain, God of War 3, and the final nail in the coffin was The Last of Us. They just started crushing it with exclusives. We have Jenny Love saying Infamous 1 and 2 were actually my first platinums. God bless them. I had got a PS3 right after the DDoS attack, so I chose it as my free game. I always go evil first because that's the complete opposite of how I am. Also, the red electricity was way cooler. We have Nicholas McMath saying, can't wait for the video. It was the first game me and my brother got for the PS3 when we were kids. We didn't finish it when we first got it, but his brother went back years later. You have Hauntaholic saying, this was one of the very first game series I enjoyed when I was younger. The series and the Force Unleashed games, I would constantly rent both of them whenever Blockbuster was still around. Good times. I really wish we could get a new game. Hell, even a remake would be cool to see. Maybe one day Sucker Punch can make it happen for the fans. Infamous fan for life. Again, honestly, thank you so much for the comments. Those are good. Even like choosing the evil playthrough. Like, yeah, there's something very special to the red. I realized that when replaying the game. When you play it as good, I don't know, you get so comfortable with the lighting, and then not only do you feel more powerful with evil, but you have the red, right? You have that kind of backing, the visual kind of flair to show you that you are just one evil man. So yeah, I mean, again, thanks so much for the comments, and I agree. I mean, it's a special game. It's a special game with the flaws. I'm not saying I didn't want this video to come off like it's some terrible game now. It's just, it's not as good as I remember. I definitely don't hold it up as high as I did, but I enjoyed going back. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought, because I thought I'd have a little bit more fun with it, and I don't know, it can be challenging. This is a tough game, and again, God bless you for doing the platinums for 1 and 2. I think 2 is an easier one. 1, oh my God, I would never go through this on, maybe one day, maybe if it forced me, I would go through it on hard, but there you go. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.